have with me Ananth Krishnan, the CTO of TCS, and Professor S. Subramaniam, the VC of Shastra Deemed University. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Professor is going to be my co-host, and Mr. Ananth Krishnan will be our guest today. And we're delighted to have you at a time when work from home has become such a big conversation starter. People have finally got used to the idea of working from home. TCS is possibly one of the first proponents of the idea that it actually leads to no lapse in productivity. And you've also announced that you plan 75% of your work from home by 2025, which is called 25-25, which sounds very catchy. So thank you for being with us, Mr. Krishnan. And if I may, I'd like to open with a question which sort of arises from the gender debate. Is it true, and has it been so in your experience in the past 4 months, that it actually leads to better productivity, especially from women? And can it be an opportunity for women especially to to be more integrated in the workforce? Because as you know, in the past few years, we've seen a decline in the number of women in the workforce, which is a very troubling figure. So 35 to 24%, the decline. So is there an opportunity in this for women especially?
Thank you, Kaveri, and for the opportunity, Dr. Vaidya. As ever, pleasure to be with you on the panel. Kaveri, to your specific question, in the technology industry and in the broader context of IT, TCS, and specifically, we have actually had a very, very positive directional increase in our gender diversity in India and, of course, globally as well. And we have actually gone the other way from your statistic that you quoted. We are now, if I remember right, more than a third of TCS at the overall TCS level are women. And if I look at the entry levels, the last 5-7 years, the cohorts which have come in, the percentage is actually nearly 50%. So to that extent, I think we have been very fortunate to have such a good gender diversity. We work pretty hard at it, and that has yielded results. Now, on the productivity angle, we are still in very early days. As a computer scientist, I would say that we haven't yet got enough data to say what is the overall impact of the work from home on productivity as a whole, and then we'll have to disaggregate it to gender and other demographics. But it's an interesting question. I'd love to see run some actual measurements and come back to you perhaps in a few months.
Yeah. I also wanted to discuss the other idea, the other aspect of work from home, although I'm a great proponent of it as well, and I think it really serves women extremely well, is of course the whole Bell Labs model, that most of the ideation and innovation happened when there was an exchange of ideas between scientists and engineers in the canteens, this is one of the great ways apparently you can foster innovation. So there is that aspect, that interface gets lost somewhere. What's your opinion on that?
The human beings are very social by nature. We, I think, like to congregate, exchange ideas, as you said. Cafeteria, the coffee machine, in the TCS campus, the canteens, and so on. They are a very, very strong part of work culture, and I think it goes with that overall social nature of humanity as a whole. Now, in the current circumstance, I think the virtual coffee machine has actually appeared. And this is, again, still pretty anecdotal. It's still emerging in terms of a best practice. But many of us actually who have been living this life for the last few months, we've set some blank time on our calendars, and given the benefits of modern technology, calendar time actually gets published. So somebody in my team who wants to get in touch with me would know that between 4 and 4:15 Ananth is available, and they'll just buzz me on either my my laptop or the messaging system and so on. Sir, how are you? I've just had I want to have a chat and so on. So and I might do the same with my teams as well. So yeah, so we are doing our best to do that. And again, the technologies are available for people to have these ad hoc encounters. Some of them are using it well. And is that a trend for the future that we might see more of? We'll see. The science fiction authors have always been ahead of us in imagining societies where human beings actually never talk to each other, never are even near each other.
Yeah.
My favorite author growing up and even now was Isaac Asimov. He's written some pretty good books around this theme. So we'll see. I mean, this is a 3-month observational window, and I don't think we should jump to conclusions one way or the other.
But do you see going forward any of the lessons that you've learned from these past 4 months, 3 months? When you look at your workplace in 2025, what specific lessons have you learned, especially as a manager? The out of sight, out of mind idea that managers have, then there's no accountability. It tends to send managers into a panic. And, the idea of 2-hour-long meetings where everybody is accounted for and everybody says what they're doing. That whole model has to change. How will it change?
Kaveri, I hear you what you're saying, but from a work culture perspective, again, broadly tech industry, TCS in particular, we have been pretty fortunate that we have got many of the foundational building blocks for the kind of way of work that we are in right now in place for perhaps a few years, if not a couple of decades, right? So the informality, the ability to walk up and address somebody by their first names and not really having too much of a rigid culture and so on. So to the tech industry and to us, I think it's fairly natural. So that is one. The second is that the nature of the industry, and if I look at myself, I used to be called the chief traveling officer of TCS. I used to be on the road for literally 18, 20 days in a month, like many of my colleagues in the leadership team. And it so happens now that 18, 20 days in a month, I don't have to travel. I am much more accessible and reachable to everybody, my family first, my teams, of course, my colleagues, friends, and so on. So I think that predictability is a positive from my personal perspective, right? So if, and the fact that I used to be traveling all the time and still connected to my work, it feels no different. It's just that it's a positive that I'm actually at home now.
Right. One other quick question, then I'll ask Professor to step in as well. The idea that when we work from home, we end up working longer and harder. That's also a possibility. And it's a very Indian thing as well. That's what I've observed. You have seen, how the world works as well. In TCS, you have employees from all over the world. Is that very specific to India, this idea of borderless time? That our work days stretch into weekends and our weekends stretch into work days, and there's really no 9 to 5 in any industry anymore.
There have been actually in the past ethnographic studies which have sort of looked at the meaning of time in different cultures. And there is a hypothesis, which at least some people have propagated, to say that people living in, let's say, the tropical regions, India included, have an abundance of time. We actually don't have a sense of time because sunlight is abundant for us.
Yeah.
People living in the northern latitudes, where there are much shorter days, and conversely, in the summers they value their much longer sunlight hours. But since they have constrained sunlight, they value time much more. Right? So this is a hypothesis, right? And so there are people for and against that. So to that extent, the ability for if you believe that hypothesis, the ability for cultures like India to pay no attention to time, whether you're working or you're at leisure, is probably built into some 10,000-year-old reflex based on the fact that we happen to live in a sunlight abundant zone. Coming to the specifics of today's context, I think the way I would say people have discovered more time for something else is very personal. I gave you the example of my travel hours outside my home base. Some people have anecdotally told me that the fact that they don't have to commute for an hour a day each way to work and come back, those 2 hours a day are now available, and that adds up to, if you work 5 days a week, that's like 10 hours of extra time, and that's being applied in learning or somewhere else, or with family, or for personal exercise, or whatever, or a hobby, and so on. So that people are now finding the extra time. Is all of it going to work? Perhaps not. We are seeing, again, anecdotally, increased productivity and so on and so forth. But I'm not satisfied. As a computer scientist, I think I need a little more data before I make pronouncements which are quite sweeping.
Yes. Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam, would you like to step in?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I would like to just pick from the culture thread. Because you raised about the 25-25 model that was announced by TCS, creating kind of a very secure borderless workplace. Now, touching the culture part is also the socio-cultural part. Now, how much of this 25-25, because in India, again, if somebody asks me, where are you working? And I say, I'm working for TCS. And for many of those who are asking me that question, unless I go and sit inside that big building of TCS, they wouldn't even believe that I'm working for TCS. So socially, how is this acceptability of work from home going to gain momentum as we move forward? Because this 25-25 is definitely a very strong message that TCS has sent to the industry itself.
So, Vaidhi, let me kind of step back and tell you where 25-25 comes from, and why did we articulate it? What was the underpinning, shall we say, motivation behind that? And looking back, it's only a few months, but in early March, when we were seeing the signs that the pandemic is actually very serious, and it had in early March, it had already had significant visibility outside the original zones, which were all in the east, and Europe was already impacted. The US was seeing cases and so on. So it looked like it's going to be global. India was also pretty much seeing the first few instances and so on. By mid-March, TCS and perhaps many others took the stand that this is going to be fairly serious. It is not going to be something which is going to be transitional. And it needs not just an immediate response, which is of course required, but also requires a very considered strategic view. So that is the underpinning of the 25-by-25, that it is not a knee-jerk, it is not something which came and will go away and so on and so forth. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that when we were formulating our immediate response, we found that there are many building blocks that are required for such remote work, which already exist for TCS and broadly for the technology industry. It doesn't exist or did not deem to be very important for other industries, but by and large, the tech industry was fairly well geared for remote work because it's part of our way of work. We had the location independent agile, for example. We had the ability to connect teams in multiple locations, even within the same city, across cities, across the world, into a seamless software or service delivery organization. We had a machine-first model which embraces technology. There's nobody in TCS who's technology agnostic. Everybody kind of gets in and uses technology the right way for a and let machines have the first right of refusal, as we like to say it. Many such features, cultural as well, were very positive for us to move into this mode. The third aspect is, I guess, the TCS and Tata mindset that respect for the individual, making sure that the individual is placed first and center. You know, the company, the strategy, the world at large, all important, but safety of the individual was, I think, what drove many of our early decisions, and thankfully so. We said that we must have the ability to assure every TCSer and every prospective TCSer that TCS will take care of you, right, in some sense. So there was no real deviation from that. So these are some of the underpinnings of the 25-25 story. So what is the 25-25 story itself? So what we basically have said, and you probably are aware of all this, but I'll essentially give the audience a quick flavor. What we have said is that by future, and we have said 2025 as an indicative timeline, only 25% of our employees may need to be at office for us to achieve the overall productivity of 100%. Which means that the other 75% could work from home, they could be remote, they could be somewhere else, but not physically in an office. For an individual, they might need to spend only 25% of their time in a traditional office. And the other 75%, they could be elsewhere. They could be at home, they could be elsewhere. So that's from an individual perspective. And then there are many other aspects of 25-25 that for a given team, not more than 25% could be in one location. You know, a team could be composed of people living in different cities, even different countries, and so on, and the technology would enable them to come together. The virtual coffee machine that Kaveri asked me is part of that design, right? So how does one make distributed teams? So there are many different aspects that we have thought through. Now, that is the vision that we have articulated, because today, because of the current crisis, something like 95, 97% of TCS is working from home. Yep. Even if we take the global TCS into account and the countries which have reopened and so on and so forth, and many in Europe have reopened, the East have reopened, Australia, New Zealand have reopened and so on. Even discounting those, it's a very large percentage of TCS is still at home, predominantly in India. So what does that mean? That means that while we are at, let's say, 1% of the India workforce is back at work in the traditional office today. We're going to take that up to perhaps 5%, maybe 10%, work with that employee comfort as our primary driver of that decision. And of course, local regulations and other issues, safety issues, the state of the pandemic and so on and so forth. We'll take it specifically. Now, will we build that up to a point where we are confident that, yes, this is all the parameters of individual safety are concerned? Given that we are able to run the business, serve our customers, build our products, do research, all aspects of TCS are actually positively functioning today. And I say all aspects, I'll give you one example which not too many people pay attention, but the first AGM to be held completely virtually, shareholders AGM was TCS. Yep. Now everybody's doing it because, hey, it works, and it's it not just is a good thing to do, but a lot of shareholders are very positive that it's happened. Our board of directors have met multiple times virtually over the last few months, including two quarterly end and annual meetings. The associates, our people are of course very positive. Clients are very happy in the sense that they are not seeing any dip. We are actually seeing positive responses from them to say, please teach us, how did you do this?
Yeah.
So their operations and their employees are not able to work effectively from their home and so on. So far the feedback seems to be positive.
Very positive.
Directionally, will we get to 25 by 25? We would like to, but as I said, it's an evolving landscape.
Good. So given that positivism that's already built into the co-COVID work culture that you have built, so I think you have a lot of first mover advantage as we move into the post-COVID era. And nice that people have stopped calling you the chief traveling officer, but I've always seen you as the chief technology practitioner, because anything that is contemporary, I see the CTO of TCS immediately testing it in real time workplace. But this positivism is not an overnight success story. I'm sure you would have faced a lot of challenges in the last 3-4 months. Can you explain to us challenges by way, customer engagement, new businesses, academic institutions, your own research? What, according to you, would be the top 3 challenges that you were able to successfully, surmount to generate this aura of positivism?
So we gave it a fair bit of thought and consideration. One of the positives of the pandemic has been that at all levels, individuals, from the junior most to the senior most, we have had an opportunity to reflect upon our purpose, our core purpose in life as individuals, as members of our families, our communities, of course, the company and the world at large. And that reflection from a TCS perspective has given us a fresh view on not just the immediate challenges, which I will come to in a minute, but also what does the medium and long term look like? Perhaps later in this conversation, I'll talk about that as well. But coming to the immediate challenges, the first challenge has been the response itself, not just for ourselves, but for every individual, to help them recover from what is happening today, disruption, illness, uncertainty, and so on and so forth at the individual level, all the way to organizations, our customers, and other stakeholders. So that response phase needed very, very organized and indeed heroic efforts from many stakeholders inside TCS, outside TCS, our customers, our partners, and others. And thankfully, in a couple of weeks, perhaps by 3 weeks or so, Rajesh, our CEO, was able to declare that TCS is open for business. Mm-hmm. And that was a very positive message which went out.
Yep.
Once that challenge was, that immediate challenge, not to belittle it, it was hugely challenging. We were all connecting with each other remotely and organizing things and making sure that people on the ground are safe and are able to reach safety and so on, and regulations worldwide and so on. It's hugely complex, but got done. The second challenge was to now look at this from the resilience perspective. Mm-hmm. What is that response? Now that we have reached a certain level of stability, we are open for business, how do we build resilience into the model itself? That is where the whole notion of what we said, the secure borderless workplace, many other things. Customers were asking us, how do you, TCS, help us build the same resilience that you seem to have demonstrated, and so on. That continuous engagement with customers and stakeholders was very key. Many of us are on government committees, at the national level, at the international level, at the state level, and so on. My startup ecosystem, we were engaging with them, the academic partners, we've been engaging with you. That constant input and dialogue and recalibrating at the leadership level, we were having literally what we call a daily stand-up meeting. You don't have to actually stand, but figuratively speaking, which would just bring all these together in an hour and say, all right, what is the CEO hearing? What is the COO hearing? What is the CTO hearing? And all the business leadership. So that kind of response phase gave us the groundwork for the resilience challenge, which is to say, what are the patterns which are emerging? Where is it that we can help? So many things happened from a research perspective. we started almost 70 odd initiatives with different agencies across the world. Some were very local, some are very national, some are continuing even today, some are very research oriented and so on and so forth. So the COVID response from a TCS research perspective is something which kicked off pretty much in the same time frame as a resilience at an overall fabric level. The second part of it was engaging with the immediate needs. So customers needed cybersecurity, they needed to digitalize, they needed to move things to cloud, they needed to put in collaboration infrastructures, and so on. So those were all part of the resilience story, immediate. And that is ongoing in many parts of the world. In some cases, it's already done. Other cases, it will continue as we speak. The last challenge is adaptability, because now people realize that, hey, this is a good instance of a global pandemic, which has happened before. I mean, some of the reading that I've been doing is indicative that pandemics of this nature have occurred in human history, perhaps a dozen times or more in the last 1,000 years. But by no means this is going to be the last one.
Yep.
So how does one adapt to a situation such as this? It's very unfortunate and it is ongoing, so we don't know how it will turn out. But let's assume that we get past this. How do we adapt to the future? That is where there is a lot more of thinking going on.
Okay.
And then it becomes very specific. How do individuals adapt? How do we as customers of different industries, how do we expect them to behave? Mm-hmm. So the whole notion of contactless, for example, it seems to be overriding everything. Right? Can some industries survive in that mode? No, because they are built on the fact that people congregate together. Right? Sports events, for example. We are seeing sports events on television, but clearly not live in the stadium. Right? So is that going to be the way of the future? These are questions which are emerging from the adaptability aspect. So those are the challenges. Immediate response, almost done everywhere. Resilience, adaptability, and purpose.
Okay. May I just step in here, Mr. Krishnan, and ask you about two things. One, are you seeing, although as you said, you're not traveling so much, but are you hearing a backlash against globalization, which we had come to accept in the world? Do you feel that it's happening now?
Kaveri, I don't see that. If anything, the world has come together in a positive way. I think countries are collaborating with each other in, at least in my world of science and technology. The efforts, for example, to find a set of treatments for COVID-19 or vaccines and so on, they are extraordinarily global. If I look at value chains for different industries, they are continuing to be fairly global and positively so. There's a lot of positive exchange of information on different aspects and so on. So I don't think I see that, but again, it could be a hypothesis that we need to test.
Or it could be that governments perhaps are withdrawing and corporations and individuals are taking their place and deciding that they have to work together. Collaboration is the only way out.
I'm not an expert in that area of discourse, so I'll take your word for it.
The other question I wanted to ask you was about the new recruits. That you said that you're going to honor your commitment to hiring them. How does one socialize new recruits in this kind of environment? It's going to be quite a challenge, isn't it? The 18-year-old or the 21-year-old, 22-year-old you pick up from IIT Delhi, the way he or she is going to be socialized now will be very different from the way you were socialized, perhaps. So how will that happen?
Well, it's an opportunity. So I'll tell you what we're doing, and we will see perhaps a few years later whether this practice actually worked more effectively or not. So what we are doing is that there is a entire process that we are calling remote onboarding, which is essentially to allow initially campus recruits, but increasingly even our people who we hire based on experience from other industries or other roles to come in and essentially take over their roles in TCS in a completely touch-free remote way, perhaps without ever coming to a TCS office, at least for the next few weeks or months. So that is the process definition. So many of us, predominantly our HR teams, but many of us from different parts of TCS also collaborated to design that whole process. We have tested it on at least a couple of cohorts of recent joinees who have come on board. I interacted with one of them. These were from the management schools that we hired because they were the first ones to sort of graduate out and become formally available. So they're not the 21, 22-year-olds, but they worked elsewhere, they're experienced, they've done MBAs now, and they're looking forward to careers in TCS. And we did the entire onboarding experience when they were sitting at home, and most of us were sitting at home too. And breaking it, I'll just give you one instance. One of the key aspects of an onboarding process is a dialogue with the top management of the company. And that worked well. I addressed, and all my colleagues in the leadership team, we addressed them virtually like we are doing today. And at least the response has been good. Many of them have connected with me on LinkedIn, and they're gung-ho, they send me mails, they call me, etc. So that's perhaps okay from the immediate perspective, right? So that is one example. We will be testing, improving this process as we go. We are onboarding, as we speak, all the new hires from the IITs into TCS research in a few weeks' time. The human touch part of it is perhaps a positive. My colleagues in HR have been literally in daily touch with each of them, getting all kinds of questions answered, but also helping us onboard them. So if Kaveri happens to be in city X and you have to be productive on some date in July or August when you're supposed to take over your new job, it's our problem to get you the right communication equipment, the right computing equipment, and give you all the briefings and introduce you to all the right people, do the organized steps which will get you to be productive. It could be training, it could be whatever, right? And there's logistics involved, which was not involved earlier, right? Previously, you just show up at an office and your workplace and everything else is ready. Now your workplace has to come home, right? So there's a whole set of people working on how to enable that, whether it's a laptop or any other piece of equipment that will be required for you.
And then there's so many issues, the internet, household space.
Exactly, right? So we're working through all of that. So, the good news is that we have identified all the challenges. Some of them we can solve reasonably well, and it's being tested. It will scale in the next few months as a lot of the undergrad new hires start coming in. But as I said, it's a learning for them. They're probably doing it for the first time. We are certainly doing it for the first time at this scale. So we'll improve as we go forward. And to your point, I'll probably look back, from 5 years from now to understand what was the onboarding experience of somebody who joined in this period versus somebody who joined a year later or a year before. And then we can actually do what I like, actually a statistically valid test to say, this hypothesis works, this one didn't.
Absolutely. Great.
But talking from my personal experience, I can say that, this touch element has already started. Now that Shastra has also declared our results yesterday for the graduating batch, and already the remote onboarding exercise has started for our students who are recruited by TCS, and they're looking forward for this exciting remote onboarding as well. But having said that, going back to your previous response to this globalized collaborative work environment that's happening, from TCS response, from a business response, from the policy announcement of this Atmanirbhar, how do you find a TCS position in the global landscape when it comes to about new products which are on the higher side of the IT value chain? Beyond the services, how is it going to get aligned to Industry 4.0? So how is the workplace going to be redefined, considering these are the emerging business opportunities? Is that going to be repositioning new products than services? How are you going to handle this emerging opportunities?
So, Dr. Vaidi, you have, I think, seen the, or at least you have got a mental view of the way in which we do our strategic planning.
Yes.
There are, at any point in time, a few hundred things, I think 500 things that TCS CTO has to worry about from a future perspective.
Correct.
Some of them are technologies, some of them are what we call platforms. AI, 5G, and so on are platforms which can be applied in multiple ways. Many of them are industry trends. TCS works in about 15 major industry segments, so we watch the trends in those industries very closely. There are some broad business trends, focus on the customer, focus on exponential business models, ecosystems. These are all broad business trends. And then there are societal trends. Right? Kaveri mentioned a few of them, globalization versus localization, pandemics versus no pandemic, and so on. So these are societal trends that impact every technology, every business. And we have laid it out in the form of a periodic table and so on. The top 100 are what we pay a lot more attention to. There is a good methodology which picks the top 100 from the long list of 500. We call it a digital exponentials table. And every year we look at it not just from a research perspective, but from a strategy perspective. I use it to drive my investments and so on. So the question that you asked me, I first went to the team which manages this process within my organization. And they basically asked them that, guys, what are you seeing? Let's go back to the 500 things that we normally track. Tell me if there are some completely new things that have come onto the list of 500. And then let's re-look at the way in which we prioritize the top 100. Has that changed? So after several iterations, we actually published this in our innovation forum, which happened on the 3rd of June to our customer community. And the initial finding is that in the top 100, there are 16 changes. So again, it's just a data point. It's our methodology, but the pandemic has had a 16% impact on future technologies, business models, platforms, business trends, and societal trends. 16 boxes are either moving up or down in the periodic table, or they are completely new, or something went out of the periodic table to accommodate the new ones. Of these 16, nearly 60% are in the immediate horizon. They are, clearly no big surprises there. Cloud has become more important. Cybersecurity has become more important. Data fabric has become more important. Collaboration tools have become more important. Remote work, industrial safety. So there are about 8 or 9 of these which are in the here and now. And it didn't require too much of analysis to say, this is what the market needs. Let's just go do it. And our response over the next few weeks, months, perhaps even all of this year will be in that. In the midterm, the platform technologies are looking very promising.
Okay.
There is an increasing amount of opportunity for AI in areas much beyond just automation. AI as a bridging technology across multiple industries, AI for customer experience, AI for digital twins. TCS Research is working closely with some of the municipalities in India to create a digital twin of the city itself.
Okay.
Right? Can we help the municipalities decide on their lockdown relaxation at a granularity of a street or a mohalla or a part of the town which is a few hundred people? Right? For that, you need to be able to create a twin of the city and twin of every individual in that city. And with today's AI, in theory, we can do it. We're actually proving it in a couple of cities. We'll see how that goes. But digital twins for an enterprise, can an enterprise digital twin come faster because of this? The answer is absolutely yes. Many customers of ours are now asking us to build twins of their businesses, run those what-if scenarios and say that, how will we respond if and then the if is appropriate to that industry. This used to be done only in manufacturing, in oil and gas plants, utility, power utilities, aerospace, and so on. A very niche and very expensive to do. But this is now jumped up in terms of what is the art of the possible. Human behavior modeling at the intersection of computer science and the behavioral sciences, the humanities, broadly speaking, I think is going to see a lot more of interest, especially in those industries which are very critically close to the individual.
Okay.
Retail, airlines, hospitality, media, and physical sport, a sport event. We talked about stadiums being empty and so on. What will motivate people to actually, in a sustained way, adopt the new beginning that this could be? So those are some of the examples in the medium term.
Yeah, got it. Before Kaveri summarizes, just a quick question on the research. You've been a career researcher throughout, and what is your sense of the vaccine coming? There is a lot of news, media reports on different research for the COVID vaccine. And I also read about your CTO research lab in Hyderabad on the synthetic biology work that you're doing, unless there is intellectual property involved. Can you share your insights on where are we when it comes to a vaccine for COVID?
So before I jump into the vaccine story, a little bit on that work that we published. It is not, it's all in public domain.
Yep.
The TCS Life Sciences Research Lab as part of TCS Research Hyderabad, they published a candidate list of 31 molecules based on their modeling of the 3CL protease. Essentially, this is a protein target in a coronavirus, of which the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2 virus is a type, which inhibits this particular protease and hopefully prevents it from replicating, even if it infects a human being. So these 31 molecules candidate list, and the way in which these were qualified from a very long list of potential candidates is being published. Many groups across the world are picking it up and they're synthesizing it and so on. So from a molecular model to a actual physical treatment, the path is pretty long, but at least we have started and contributed. That's what TCS Research did. And there are groups in different countries which have evinced interest. Some have validated our results, some are actually going to formulate it and so on. Many treatments like that are in the pipeline in different parts of the world. So before a vaccine emerges, I think treatment protocols will probably be the immediate response that we will see. Vaccines, of course, will be a longer term story. Many groups are working, as you rightly said. And I think there is a lot of optimism that the trials are promising as they are today. And trials are fairly involved and a lot of care is taken that it is truly effective, no side effects and so on. Whenever the vaccines come out, I think there are two challenges that we anticipate. One is that the whole process of administering the vaccine to the world's population is a huge logistics challenge. Making the vaccine itself is something that India will significantly contribute to. Yeah. But administering the vaccine in a way that is effective, and bear in mind that many influenza vaccines are not single use. It's not like you get lifetime immunity. You might need multi-use at periods of time. The sheer logistics of that is going to be a challenge. So we are looking at that problem and see what we can do from a planning and a logistics and a treatment regime perspective. But vaccines, hopefully something will be available in a few months. But that doesn't solve the problem. Everybody who's vulnerable at least must be able to take the vaccine and then repeat it if required and so on. Meanwhile, treatments will perhaps be our first line of defense.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, sure. Just a couple of last questions, Mr. Krishnan. Is there anything particular that you noticed about India's response to the pandemic? which surprised you and which, you would like to take note of?
I think the way in which the communities have come together at literally the grassroots level, people inside urban complexes in cities or in smaller towns, villages. In terms of awareness, I think it's been phenomenal. In terms of adherence and behavior, I think it's been surprising. It's been good broadly, but it's been positively surprising from the fact that people have actually adopted many of these features which have been well advised. Otherwise, we could have been in far worse shape. I think that's the way I would look at it.
And the last question, that is there something that is particularly an opportunity for India and for TCS within this global crisis that you can take advantage of?
From a purely TCS perspective, I think we are extraordinarily positioned. We have walked the talk as far as our philosophy and strategy is concerned. We have demonstrated the response, the resilience, and the adaptability. We stayed true to our purpose, and the stakeholder universe seems to appreciate that. So therein lies the opportunity, because the opportunity space is what it was. There are some immediate priorities and changes which will be required in the near term, but the midterm, long term, I think TCS, the IT industry, India, we are in the right place. So it's just for us to actually execute and capture that place.
And one opportunity for India?
I think the credibility of the Indian system of bringing, as I said, people together to respond to a crisis of this nature in an open society.
Right.
That's something we can be really proud of.
Right.
That's
really well said. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishnan. It was really enlightening to listen to you. I wish we had more time, but maybe another day. Thank you so much for giving us time today.
Thank you very much. A nice way to close also, Ananth Krishnan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.